So for today's class, I'm going to focus on a few topics related to symbology and representation as it relates to this concept of census data. So in this map here, in the map package that I gave you guys, there's a few layers in here that I want you to look at. There is a state layer right here. And if you open the attribute table for this, I believe it should already have some basic population data associated with it right here. So this is from the 2010 census and a bunch of data related to population of various demographics and groups. So there's that. And then in the counties, we have a similar data set where it has the county name, but also has some information related to population and demographics and all that stuff. So with the county layer viewing, I'm going to show you guys, this is kind of a review of what I showed last week, but how do you symbolize population on a city or in the country is you go to the Symbology tab in the property. So I double click on counties and you go to Symbology and you go to quantities. You want the value here to be set to the population. In this case, do pop 2012 since it's more recent. And I'll show you guys later how to find the most recent population data. But for the purposes of this class, that's fine. This is fine. So that's selected. You can choose the number of classes, basically the number of values that your map's going to be represented by. So let's just do 10. Then click apply, and this is what you get. Actually, let me make the gradient a bit more interesting. I'll do this blue, yellow gradient. Okay. So this is fine. This is fine as a population map, but there's a few issues that are related to this map. First off, the issue here is that some of the boundaries of the counties are way, way bigger than boundaries of other counties. And some of these counties that are way smaller have more people than these counties, or rather they have the same number of people, but they're represented the same way. Like for instance, like some of these orange parcels right here in Arizona, where really it's not that dense at all. The correct way to represent population is actually not to represent the value of the population county itself, but to represent it by its density. So that's what this second line here in the Symbology tab, normalization, is for. Basically what it does is it takes the top value and it divides it by the bottom value to get essentially a density. So say like how many people per square mile lives in this county. So this bottom value here, you want to always put a area. And in this data set at the very bottom, there's a square mile option. So if you click on that and click apply, you kind of see the map begins to fade out a little bit more. But what happens is those areas, such as here in Arizona, where there actually weren't that many people to begin with, fades out and becomes more even. So this is a more accurate representation of the density of population in the United States.
So what was it before? It was just...
So this is fine. At the same time, you can probably increase the color range a bit better. So what you want to do is always want to go, when you're making maps, you always want to double check the classification button right here. So if you click on classify, you can see this is how those ramps are being broken up. And it's using this method called natural breaks. Sometimes this method isn't the best, so you want to experiment with some of these other options here to see what results you get. For instance, if you click on quantize, which is an option that I really like, you kind of see that it begins to scrunch up all the breaks closer to the highest density on this edge here. And then it basically ignores almost the outliers, for instance. So if you click on OK and apply, this map here is a bit more of an accurate representation of the population of the United States. You kind of see the eastern half over here is more densely populated than the western half here, which is less densely populated. If you click on classify, you can also go use something like geometric interval. This is also a good one to test out with. So click OK and apply. This is also a very good representation of that. In this case, it evens out the middle, so there's less red except in the large urban areas. But in the middle here, where it's not super dense, but it still has a lot of people, it's in this mid-tone of yellow. So this is good. I'm just going to actually for the purposes of this tutorial, I want you guys to use a black to white gradient. So let me see. And do this, is select the black to white gradient, but then right click anywhere in the table down here and click flip symbols and click apply. And that's what it's going to do, is basically make the dark areas the highly populated areas and the white areas the less populated areas. Then what I'll do is I will right click here or select all by shift selecting, and then select everything, click on properties for selected symbols, and then for the outline color just change that to no color. Click OK and apply. And this makes the map, it doesn't have that border on it, so it's a nice clean gradient. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take classes, I'm going to ramp it up to 30 classes like that to create a very nice clean gradient. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to select everything by shift holding and selection, right clicking and properties for selected symbols, and then turn off the outline. So this is a nice gradient of the population density in the United States. I'm going to copy this layer by right clicking on it, clicking copy, and then go into layers, and then click paste layers. So what this does is it just basically makes a copy of that reference data set in here. It doesn't make a copy of the actual data itself. All this is just a different representation of that. So you can say, make this just a simple regular county symbol like that. So in the tutorial folder, there is a CSV folder. And in here, I have the county level results for the presidential election from 2008 to 2016. So I would recommend just open that file and open up Excel. I just want you guys to observe how the information is organized. Now, to really get the most out of your GIS data, it helps to know a little bit of Microsoft Excel. So I'm not going to teach you guys everything about Microsoft Excel, but you just got to know some of the basics about how to organize and sort data. But basically, one way to easily represent and see everything is to click everything here and then go to, let's see, format, and then click on auto fit column width, and just makes everything on fit so you can kind of see everything together. So what this is showing is for every single county, the total amount of votes that were cast for that election, the total number of Democratic votes, and also the total number of GOP votes, or the Republican Party. And then there's an other for all the other parties here. And this goes from 2008, 2012, which is the Obama-Romney election, and then the 2016 Clinton-Trump election. So for today's class, we're going to focus on the 2016 data here. But I just want to show you guys how it's organized. It's just a very simple row on top with the headers, and then all the data is sorted out. When you use data in the Excel format, you always want it to be organized like this. It has to be just a simple row at the top with the headers, and then the data is sorted at the bottom. No other thing is necessary. Sometimes you find data sets with sources and other texts around. You want to delete that and clean it up. So that's fine. This is all good. I already set it up for you guys, so we can exit out of here. And we're going to add this table to ArcMap. So the way you do that is you go to your Add Data button here. You find where you saved the information. So in my case, I saved it here. And here's that presidential results CSV file. So just click on it and add it. And what happens is it opens it up in here. And it's showing it on this new table of contents button, list by source. We've been viewing things by list by drawing order, which is this guy here, but the button next to it is the list by source object. And because it's doing this because this table data is not visual data yet.
Sorry, how do you just get to your desk?
Okay, so when you have the presidential election data brought into your ArcMap document, right-click on that layer. It's right here on my side here, and then go to the attribute table. And you see this is basically the exact same data that you saw in the Excel file a second ago, but now the header has now been converted into the actual header for this table here. So it's nicely organized. Everything's good. This data is not spatial yet, so what we gotta do is use what's known as join, a join function. We gotta find a way to relate this data here, which is just a table format, to the county data right here. So if you go to this table data here, you see that on the very left side, there is this FFIPS code number here. This number here basically is a numerical code that is addressed to each of these counties. Every county has a unique code associated with it. So this code you can use to link this information to the information in your county data set on the side here. So I'm going to open the new county layer that I just made a copy of. And if you scroll through the numbers here, you see there's a state FIPS, there's a county FIPS, and then there's a FIPS number right here. So this number here in the county data set should link up with this data set right here. You want to, before you do anything else, you always want to make sure that these two data sets, these two columns, have the same data type. What do I mean by that? If you right click, and I'm in the county data set right here, if I right click on this and go to properties, you see this is a string currently. And if I go to this CSV, I right click on that, this is a long integer, basically, a number. You always want to make sure you link numbers with numbers and strings with strings. So basically all this means is I got to convert this in the county layer here to a number. And the easiest way is just to make a copy of it. So I'm going to go to add field. Actually, this data set doesn't allow me to do that, so I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to right click on this, data, export data, all features. I'm just going to make a new layer, call it counties. Okay. And then right click on that, click on add field. And if I'm going too fast, just let me know. I'm going to set this as a double. I'm going to call this one county code.
I think some people said bit fast.
Okay. I'll stop right here. Let me just pause it. So I made a copy, I made a new layer, or a new column called county code, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this, go to field calculator, and make the county code equal to the, what was the, I think it was, let me double check. I believe it was FFIPS, which was this one right here. So I'm going to make this equal to FIPS. So
make the new column.
Okay, so right click on the new column that you made, the field that you made, go to field calculator, and just set this equal to the FIPS value right here like that. Then click OK. And you see all it does is just makes a copy of that number over here. But now the type of data this is a double or a number. So with that set up, you're done. All you need to do is you need to go to your data table. So right here, this was that one county layer that we made a copy of. Right click on that, and there is this option called join. So when I click on join, and it's going to ask you, it's going to basically walk you through how to join the data from the election table to this shapefile right here. So number one, you want to make sure this first line here is join attributes from a table. In the first field, you want to choose the field in the shapefile that basically the column that matches the column in the election data. So that is that new column we made, county code, right? And then the table to join the layer is this election CSV. And then the field that the table we join on is the FIPS code, right? Which is, if I go to the, well, it is that one. So with all that set, just click OK. And now it's done. So if you go into the shapefile and open that attribute table, at the very edge of it, you see all that Democratic, Republican data is now brought into that shapefile right here. So you can map out the number of votes that were cast for each election for each county. So all you need to do now is go to the Symbology option. So double click on this, Symbology, go to Quantities. And let's start off by visualizing the total number of votes. So total 2016, that means the total number of votes that were cast in each county, and we'll just do like 10 classes and click apply. and you see what you get. Maybe change this color gradient to be a blue-red gradient. And what you see here is that this map feels almost like a population map. And it makes sense, right? Because more people vote in areas with more people, right? What we want to represent is, instead, is how many people voted Democrat versus how many people voted Republican. And this is where normalization comes into play again. Because if you think about it, if you take the number of people who voted Republican and you divide it by the total number of votes, you get as a percentage of Republican votes. So let's say 50 people out of 100 people voted Republican. That means 50% voted Republican, and then the other inverse, 50% voted Democrat. So what that gradient gives you is basically the Republican and Democrat percentage. So that's what we got to do. We got to use the normalization button here. So in the top line, we'll do GOP, Republican, 2016. And then bottom line, we'll do total 2016. And then what you see ends up happening is that this range here is basically a percentage, right? 4.04 to basically 100, which is this 0.95 right here. So let's just see what happens. Let's click apply. And this, let me actually do something real quick. Let me change this to geometric interval, which is my favorite. Then click apply and click OK. So this map here is very similar to the map that Donald Trump has hanging in the White House right now. That map of the entire United States looking red, right? Let me do a few things to make this actually make a bit more sense. Let me double click on this here and go to the classify option in the graduated colors here. And I'm going to do 4 classes instead, and I'll explain why. Basically, what we need to do in order to make this representative of election, we want to know which counties are mainly Republican, which counties are mainly Democrat, and which counties are within the fringe, right? Which had the most potential to be tight elections. So basically what we need to do is we want to say, like, let's say 50%, and that's this. If you kind of see what's happening here is you can drag these lines, oops, what did I just do? Let me just do this again. You can drag these lines across the grid here, like so. And you see what we basically have is 4 buckets. This bucket right here, this bucket right here, this bucket right here, and this bucket right here. You see that? See what I'm doing here? So basically, this middle line representing the middle bucket needs to be at 50%. So you can change the break values on the side right here. So let's just make that 0.5, 50%. And then we'll make this first line here, let's say make it 40%, so 0.4. The reason we want to do that is so we want to make this bucket right between 50 and 40%. That's kind of like your fringe Democrat, right? Really close, really tight race, but it's like the 40 to 50% range. And then everything outside of that is basically mainly Democrat. And then this next line here, let's make it 60%, right? 0.6. So with that set up, just click OK, then click Apply. And you see what you get is this map right here. I'm just click OK. And real quick.
How did you make
Okay, so this is what Donald Trump has hanging in his office right now. It's not an accurate representation of the election results because it doesn't take into account the population density. So what we want to do is we want to find a way to merge these 2 data sets together. And the easiest way to do that is with Photoshop. So, and actually, I mean this, like Photoshop actually is the best way, and I'll explain why. So I didn't show this in the first class, but how do you actually export this data to a format that you can edit in Adobe software? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the layout view, which you get to by clicking on this little, it's a tiny, tiny button at the bottom left corner of the data frame, and there's like a thing called layout view. And I think you guys should have what I believe is a 24 by 36 map page right here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to zoom in to the map to kind of make it fill out the page, and I do that just by clicking on this little plus icon right here. And then what I'll do is I'll right click on File, Export Map, And we're going to save this as an Illustrator file. So I'm just going to save it on my desktop, and I'm going to call this one population density. And when you save AI files, Illustrator files, I recommend making the resolution, this little option out here, really high. So I just type in 900 dpi, and that's fine. The reason you do that is because it actually, when it exports to vector format, it does kind of simplify the geometry, and if that resolution is low, like 100, it actually will make the vectors jagged. You know, it'll have that jagged effect as if it was rasterized. So just make that number really high, 900. Then click Save. And we'll just let this save.
Or would you save it as?
Just save it as an AI file, and I just saved it on my desktop. It doesn't matter what you call it.
Did you do anything like?
Okay, so when you export the population map, then make another export of the election map. So I turned off the population map, and I turned on the election map, so we're going to export that using the exact same method, export map, and I'm going to call this one election results 2016. And AI format, 900 dpi, save. Okay. Okay, so I just opened the population density map in Illustrator. And you can see that it brought in the entire data set and it's vectorized, so it has infinite resolution, which is great. This process is what I go through every time I export a new map into Illustrator. And that's to kill all the clipping masks and then ungroup every layer so it's a nice clean data set. So how do we do that? You go to Select, Object, Clipping Masks. And you see a bunch of things were selected in the Layers panel here. I'm not going to do anything else except hit the Delete key on my keyboard, like so. And then now all the clipping masks have been deleted. And then what you want to do is you want to ungroup this here. So you see this is grouped right now into clip groups. It's nicer to have this ungrouped. So I would select the entire mother layer here, and then I type in Control-Shift-G to ungroup. And you see it ungroup that that group there. And I'll just do it the same thing for this top thing here, ungroup that by hitting Control-Shift-G. So now your data set's nice and clean, it's nice and editable. You can now click on any of these shapes and you can change the line weights and all that stuff. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to click on Save. I'm going to save over the population density export. So click on Yes, click OK, and that's it. I'm doing the exact same thing with the election results map. So I'm going to open that. Now, one tip I have for you guys is sometimes if, for instance, your data set is really dense, like sometimes the map has a lot of vertices in terms of its vectors, a good way is to use the, I think it's like the preview mode, or the outline mode. So you just hit Control-Y, and it just makes the whole map run a lot faster. This is a nice like low CPU intensive mode, and things will run a lot faster in this mode. So you can do the same exact process that I did. So click on Select Object, Clipping Masks, hit Delete, and then ungroup everything just by clicking on the layer, Control-Shift-G, and you see that ungrouped. Then click on this other layer on top and Control-Shift-G. And then one thing I'll do now is, let me just zoom in real quick. This came in with the outline of the counties. I don't want that. I just want this to be a nice clean gradient. So I'm going to click on that layer, and I'm going to just, in the outline properties, just hit the None button. And now you see that all the outlines have been removed. So now just save that, save it over election results. Click OK. And now I'm going to close that, and then we're going to open Photoshop. So I'm going to in Photoshop, since this map is a 24 by 36, I'll just make a 24 by 36 sized drawing. And then we're going to place that Illustrator file in here by using the File, Place Embedded option here. And that's how you bring in Illustrator files into Photoshop. So we just first bring in the election results or the population, either one. Let's do population first. So click Place, And then the options, you want to say crop to media box, which basically means it's going to crop to the actual artboard size. Click OK, and it automatically brings in that map into Photoshop. Then we do the exact same thing for the election results. So place embedded election results, media box, OK, enter. OK, so what we're going to do is we're going to take the population map on top, and we're going to apply the little screen filter on top of that. And we see what it does. And actually what I'll do is I'll actually add an adjustment layer on top, say a curves layer, just to darken it up a bit. This here now, I think, is a more accurate representation of the election results. Why? Because it takes all the areas that are, in this case, densely populated, and the areas that are less densely populated, in this case the white, and it basically uses that white to hide all the layers, all the red layers below here. So what you get is all the areas in the west where basically no one lives has now been turned white, and then everywhere else that is dark in the population density map is represented with a more intense tone.